My name's Angie Bartels, and I'm a Charting the Life course ambassador. I finished up my ambassador training about a year ago now. I've used Charting the Life course in several different aspects of service delivery and collaborated with the team at UMKC on some different projects. And today we are going to talk about using the 3 buckets, and I'm going to get into my presentation now. So we're going to go ahead and start with that. All right, we're going to get started with our presentation using the 3 buckets to support staff during challenging times, which we just came out of a very challenging time with our COVID crisis. And getting started, why we might want to use the buckets as a method of organization is there's just so big sometimes you're not quite sure where to start. The buckets are a great way of breaking that down and organizing ideas, kind of a way to get you started. Assuring that all areas of support are met. The buckets make sure that you're not missing anything. I'm very visual. I like to use visuals of the buckets. I have big posters of each color of bucket that I use Post-its on. I actually have real buckets that I put slips of paper in. Just different ways, kind of, if you're a visual person like me. And also recognizing how all areas of support are connected. The visual of the buckets is very good about that. So we'll kind of talk about that as we go on. Our first bucket is discovery and navigation, and that's about finding those valid sources of information. And first is that I think just agencies need to recognize what information the staff needs. And pretty important is just that they're going through crises and challenging times on both professional and personal levels. I think going through this last COVID crisis, everybody was going through it on a personal level as well. Perhaps there was unemployment in the family, illness in the family, child care, elder care also going on. Those are stressors that was going on besides so many changes at their job. So providing as much information and support to that staff at work was of the most importance. Recognizing that information might have to be delivered in an alternative form. We all weren't very used to so many Zoom meetings a day. Sometimes the remote technology was not set up as much as it is now. So we were having to deliver hard copies to people. But recognizing that that was a need and being cognizant and finding supports for that, so staff could have the information. Some important areas to consider when supporting staff. First and foremost, kind of just logistics, like where they need to show up for work, what their schedule is. So many location changes happened. Different supervisors, different individuals to support. They needed phone numbers, they needed addresses. If they didn't even know where to show up, that was going to be a huge problem. They didn't know when to show up, they didn't know where to show up. So just the plain logistics of it. They can't take care of anyone if they're not there. Obviously safety and health and safety obviously is right there too. Assuring staff just had the most up-to-date safety measures and protocols. If you think back, the protocols changed so much from the beginning of the crisis to the end of the crisis on a daily basis, and having the staff informed of those. That the staff had access to individuals' medical records and safety plans. Again, they were working with individuals they were not familiar with. They needed to have access to those medical records in case they had to take them to the doctor or to the hospital if the individuals had become ill. And just to know about their medical needs anyway. Resources for planning and engagements. To have central locations where lesson plans and resources could be found, where staff was not having to go out and find those too. That it was all already there for them, readily accessible. And so we're going to move on to our next bucket, which is connecting and networking. And it's really important to stay, especially during this COVID crisis, feeling connected and networking together. We were all very isolated and separated. And there was lots of limitations presented with this. Again, some of the ideas, the YouTube page where the videos were shared, the Pinterest page, private Facebook page, Microsoft Groups page, Zoom meetings. Those were things that maybe weren't as commonplace as they are now. providing that list of networking sites, not just saying they're out there, but having the networking sites readily available. The agency providing any technology that they needed for virtual watch parties, for Netflix or virtual gaming, for the individuals to stay connected between each other or the individuals with their families. This was another great thing. The staff had the individuals they supported were at other houses. Everybody was feeling very disconnected. A visual directory with photos after we checked photo releases was made that had people's addresses and phone numbers. And that way the staff and individuals could look up and see where people were, what house they were at, or if they were in an apartment, or if they were their family homes. They could write them a letter. They could make a phone call. They could have a FaceTime call between the homes. They could write a letter to their family if they weren't able to go home to their family. Staying connected through alternate means whenever you can't go visit. Thinking outside the box there. But the staff, the agency providing these resources for that. Arranging drive-by visits between the homes. If the staff needed a bigger van, a bigger vehicle for that, so the individuals could see each other. Arranging community members to drive by, firefighters, police officers, other community members to drive by, maybe if it's a birthday, or just to come by to keep engaged in the community, keep those connections going. And again, this is where that connecting and networking is so important to the information, because if you need to know who's important in the individual's life, if they're used to seeing their family every weekend, then you need to make sure that they're staying connected to their family every weekend. If they're used to seeing their family 3 times a week, that they're connecting with their family. And that's where that one-page profile from Charting the Life course is so valuable. Very accessible information about what's important to that family right there. And then you have that information so you can make these plans on staying connected and networking and come up with some alternative ways whenever you're limited on that. So
about 2 minutes left.
We're going to go into our third bucket, which is goods and services. And so it's just the goods and services. So we wanted to transfer all those tangible resources from the agency to the group homes. So just went around and kind of got everything from art supplies, fine motor things, games, office supplies, puzzles, books, balls, divided those into engagement kits and got those delivered out to the homes. We gathered up any sensory supports. We made sensory supports. And then recognized just that maybe they didn't need sensory, people maybe didn't need sensory supports before, but did now when you're stressed out. Just some examples of those would be gum, stress balls, weighted blankets, Play-Doh, slime. And not just individuals, staff also, just that sensory supports were very important. That helps de-stress. Crisis care kits made for staff, specifically designed for staff, that staff knew that there was extra care and extra time being taken for them. Encouraging notes being written to staff and individuals from administration, from house to house, from families, from different places. Snacks provided for individuals, special meals brought in for staff, individuals, different things. Personal protective equipment, cleaning supplies, paper goods. And then additional materials or resources, again, cleaning materials gathered through community drives. Again, need those materials, but again, connecting and networking to the community, bringing it back to that bucket. So kind of where that's connected, but that's those tangible goods and services that needed to get into those houses that weren't there before, that the staff needed to have access to so they could properly support. So that's kind of a good way to break those things down, that everything the staff needed to do their job that was not there before, and that you can make sure and see readily how everything's available, but a really great visual on how you kind of break down and make sure that the staff is properly supported so they can care for individuals.